Hello world and welcome. I'm Don, and in today's video we're going to look at processing a piece of art in DxO Photolab 5. So it seems like a bold statement for me to say that I'm going to be processing a piece of art in Photolab 5. And I'll be the first to say that deciding what is and isn't art is no doubt beyond my pay grade. All I mean by it is that I'm creating something that, to me at least, carries more meaning than what is immediately visible. And as I look at it, I can continue to try and digest what that might mean and what it might be symbolizing along the way. So I'll go ahead and bring up a wee behind-the-scenes picture that'll just give you a sense for how the shot was taken. Essentially, just on a desk, two lights, one from behind with a 20-degree grid on it, the other one from the front in a softbox, again a gridded softbox, trying to control the light because it is a really not a terribly big room and the walls are light. They're these same walls like are behind me, so they bounce light around a lot. So just trying to control that a little bit and get some directionality. Which I think in the end I did okay. I think straight out of camera it's actually not too bad, but we can definitely make some improvements on that. So let's jump in and take a look at it. So here is the unprocessed image, just looking at it with the full screen viewer within DxO. And I'll just take a moment and run you through what I'm planning to do. So this is the before image, as I say, and I'll start out with some exposure, some contrast, and some color work, which will be more or less global, although with the color and a little bit of the exposure, I'll be using the HSL tool. From there, I'm going to move on to healing, and I'm going to heal some of the bits on the background mostly. We've got that and that and that, and also a few bits on the pot. So a few dots, not much. I mostly want the patina to be there, but just a few dots that sort of stand out as not supposed to be there. From there, I'm going to move into the local tools, and I'm going to use the control line to select this bit of the background, and I'll blur this out a little bit more. I'm also going to add a little touch of blue to it, just to contrast with the red that's in the pot and the counter. Just a hint. Another fairly major thing I'm going to do is to add a bit of a highlight to the front of this pot, just to give it a little bit more directionality and dimensionality. It's how I imagined it, but in the end, given my lighting setup, it didn't quite come as I was hoping, so I'll add that in post. And the last thing really is this knife, I could not get light to reflect off it in an attractive way, and in the end it ended up staying quite dark, so I'm going to raise that up just a little bit. So just let me turn off my markup tool here, and that'll allow me to just do a little before and after. So this is the before, and this is where I'm headed, given the changes that I just talked to you about. So let's get down to business. Here we are in the Customize tab, ready to go. So this is my reset, ready to be edited image. And you can see along the bottom my thumbnails there. It's number 54, which is pretty much the last one I took. There are so many because getting the lights in the correct place, and then also getting the cutlery in the correct place. For many of these, I was messing about because I had the fork on this side and the knife on the other side, and the fork was getting a really hot specular highlight, and I was trying to thwart it where it was, and I was entirely unable to do that. So in the end, I just swapped places, and that ended up being a better solution. So 54 goes, a lot of small little tweaks. I actually had it dialed in terms of the lighting that I wanted for quite a while. So let's take a look at this. We've got, first of all, I think let's start with the cropping, because there's no sense fixing something that will be cropped. And I see this, I imagined it at first as a square, but in fact, given what I have, I'm not going to go quite square, but I'll bring these sides in a fair bit, and we'll go square-ish. I'm just looking at that pot. I won't probably be able to entirely center the pot, but I'll get it close. The reason I say that is because I also want the knife and fork to have a similar distance from the edge there. So it's not going to be 100% perfect, but it'll be good enough. So that's fine for the crop for now. So I'll start things off in the light space. You can see up here I'm in this light tab, and I'm actually going to start with selective tone. And to start with, I'm going to put my midtones up a fair bit. It's my main means of brightening things. I'm going to lift my shadows a little, and I'm actually going to drop my blacks just by a few, right about there. Maybe take that up one more. Next, let's move up and add a little bit of contrast. So of course it wants to put on micro contrast, and of course I'm going to take the micro contrast off. But I will add a bit of fine contrast, which I, in this case, just enjoy a little bit more. Now I'm going to next jump to my color space, and in here I'm going to do two things. I'll start out with my white balance, which I'm just going to set off of the background because the background was in fact a black piece of foam core, which, you know, close enough. So I will do that there. That seems pretty good. The other thing I want to do is to come up here to the HSL space. I'll select the red here just as my starting point, but then I'm going to also grab this hue picker and bring that down and pop it right about there. I'm going to decrease my saturation to see that little test to see that I have selected what I think I have. I notice there are a few little tones in there that aren't quite being grabbed, so I'm going to maybe widen this a touch. There we go. That is certainly grabbing everything now. So I'm going to bring that saturation up by about 25 or so. And then I'm also going to impact my exposure to a degree by increasing the luminance. Not a huge amount, but maybe around 10, 11. 11 will be fine. Next, I'm going to come over here to the greens button, and I'm going to, again, grab my picker, which actually, is it still on? Yes, it is still on. So I don't need to grab my picker, and I'll just come over here and grab a representative green. And it's grabbed a very wide space there, as you can see, and I'll do my little trick again. Has it grabbed everything, I hope? Yes, it has. So now, quite similar, I'm going to bring it up a fair bit on saturation. But in this case, the luminance, I'm not going to raise the luminance too much. In fact, I might even just drop it by a few points. Excellent. So next, let's go ahead and do some of that healing. I'll just grab the healing brush here. And I think it'll do a pretty easy job of this. I'll just have a quick go over some of these points. I'm going to go over them quite quickly first, and I'll come back and see if anything stands out to me after the fact. Try to do that in one long go. I think that looks quite reasonable. I think there's another one kind of coming down here as well. Just give that a go. Yeah, I think that looks all right. Just move that for a second. Might be something up there. Lovely. So now off to the local adjustments. It's one of the very first things I want to do is to impact my background. So I'm going to do a control line for that. So I'll just right click, grab my control line, and I will drag that out down here. Probably bring that down that way. Probably lift it back up again so I can get my eyedropper out of there. Back down. And I'll just place my eyedropper there. Have a look at that. So it's including quite a lot. So I'm going to actually crank my chroma. I know there's quite a lot of color difference in there, so I think that that's quite a safe thing to do. And I'm also I'm going to be blurring things. I think it's going to be really easy to lose the fine detail on the edge of these leaves. So I'm going to, I know from my experimentation that I'm going to need to increase this quite a bit as well to get a really solid mask around those edges. So just take that off again. And like I said, one of the things I want to do here is to add a bit of blur. So I will, not too much, maybe about 10 points of blur on the background. And you can see there that the little hairs around the edges of the plant are still intact. It was very easy to lose those given my first attempts at doing this. The other thing that I wanted to do in here is to, I'm just going to shift things so that I can see a bit better, is to go actually to the color space, and I just want to introduce a little bit of blue. Move out so that I can see this a bit better. Yeah, I think that's looking good. So it's just to contrast a little with the reds that are showing up there. So a little bit of blur, a little bit of blue. The next thing I want to do is to just grab a plain old brush, and I'm going to come here and try to just come right down the center with this. And I'm just going to raise that up a little bit. Essentially just want to add a highlight here in the center to make it look like the light is flowing around it just a little bit more. Give it a little bit more shape and a little bit more dimensionality. Excellent. So the last thing I want to do is to come over to this knife. I just want to raise it a little bit. It is shockingly dark. So I'm just going to put a wee control point here. Make it fairly small. I don't imagine it's going to come out of its bounds too much there. And literally just going to bring it up a little bit. I can't make it, if I try to go too far, it's going to look unnatural and strange. I'll just come out of the way so you can see that. Yeah, it doesn't you see how it just doesn't quite look right. And if I played with it for ages, it might come better, but I think for my money, I just want to raise it a little so it's not quite so black. Now, one other thing that I want to do is just impact my contrast a little bit more, but I'm not going to do that with the contrast slider. I'm actually going to, I believe this is a function of having Film Pack installed, but I have advanced settings here, and it allows me to hit contrast in my highlights, midtones, and shadows as separate things. So I'm going to actually go ahead and up the contrast quite a bit in the sort of, not that there'll be a lot of highlights in here, but to just stretch those out a little bit. And I'm going to also increase a fair bit of that. And not so much in the shadows. I don't want to introduce too much sort of deep blackness in those shadows, so I want to keep it just above that space. Might even just gonna pull that up a touch more. Maybe this even up a touch more too. Nice. And just looking at that, I think I want that highlight in the front to be just a little bit brighter. So I'm going to go back to my local adjustments, back to that space where I had put the highlight, and just going to bring that up a bit more. Maybe about there. Yeah, it makes a big difference, doesn't it? And how do I feel about that knife? I think that knife is okay. Great. So out of curiosity, let's see how I went compared to my first edit. So this is the one that I've just finished. And I think if I do this, it should contrast with the other one. And that's my other one that I did. Interesting, those reds are a little bit more saturated in my original one. So I had a quick peek, and the two big differences were, first of all, I had reduced the contrast in the shadows, which is what kind of gives it that little bit of a softer look in some of the spaces, down here and whatnot. And the other thing was that my white balance in the original, the temperature had been similar, but the tint was on -19, and I'm going to just, other way, bring that down because I suspect that's going to actually make a pretty big difference to the color. And in fact, I think it did. So let's have another quick peek. Yeah, pretty darn similar this time. Still a couple of little differences. The positioning of my highlight is a little bit different this time, but awfully close. Right, so there are just 2 other things that I want to do. No, make that 3. So I just realized that I never did heal the few little points on there that I was planning to heal. Just take me a second. I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller. There we go. There we go. I think that's probably, oh, there's one down there that I was keen on replacing. Nice. Now, with that done, just 2 little bits that I wanted to do, and they're in Nik Collection. And I'm back. I had installed the latest Nik Collection update just before I did this video, and when I went to launch into Nik Collection just then, it told me it wasn't installed on my computer, so I had to uninstall it and reinstall it, and now the button is there, so hopefully when I go down to press the button, it will work. That's the stuff. That's what I was hoping for. I'll just check my export settings. Yeah, great. Export is a TIFF, 16-bit. Sometimes I do export original, so I just need to always double check what's selected as I come into this. So export is TIFF. Color Effects Pro 5. So I want to add 2 things in here. Just let it launch. First is going to be Detail Extractor, and I'm going to just locally put that on the pot a little bit. And the second is Classical Soft Focus. So let's start out with the Detail Extractor. So let me go to D. Here it is. I just normally, for good measure, I could click on here because there's nothing else there. But I find that to be a trap in terms of a habit because it's easy to overwrite your stuff. So I'm just going to press the plus there to add the detail extractor. It does its thing. And like I said, I just want it on the pot right about here. Just do a wee comparison. So it just adds a little bit more contrast there. And I might actually, I love the fact that you can get at the opacity more easily now. I might actually just drop that opacity just a little bit, but I think that that's essentially what I was hoping for. Again, just a little touch more contrast in that space, maybe even just a little touch less. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. So the other one was a Classical Soft Focus. Let me just think about my alphabet for a moment there. There it is, Classical Soft Focus. Click on the plus. And this one I want actually to add a bit to the greenery. And I want it, rather than the soft focus area, to be on the diffusion area. And I know from having looked at this before that I like number 1. Each one's a little bit different in terms of what it does, but this keeps my greenery a little brighter on number 1. So I'm going to just add some control points here. Just like the feeling of it. It sort of softens things a little bit. And let me just zoom in 1-to-1. Yeah, nice. It's not impacting those little hairs. You know, it's keeping things still looking sharp, but it's just adding that little bit of diffusion glow, which I really like. Nice. So that's me. I will click on my tick box here, non-destructive edits for larger file, or not for larger files. It'll give me a larger file, but it's non-destructive. I can come back in and change it later if I want, and click apply. Excellent. So here it is. This is the TIFF that's back from Nik Collection with the final result. And of course, if I do compare here, it won't look like much, but if I can come back to the one that we were working on, we can do a quick before and after of where we came from and where we got to. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that. There may be a part 2 coming to this. When I first envisioned the image, I envisioned me in the middle of the plant, caught up, tangled up, trying to beat my way through this plant. So I may make that addition. I need to obviously take the image of myself lit in a way that it will match the lighting that was used there. So that may be coming. I may expand on that, as it was really a part of my original vision for this image. So, also, I was going to ask if you're interested. Please let me know in the comments. You know, it occurred to me as I was going to take this image of taking a bit of sort of footage of actually taking the image. But then, of course, I didn't want to go off topic because mostly it's a channel about processing things in DxO. But if people out there, if you are interested in seeing, you know, if I'm doing an image like that and you'd like to see some behind the scenes of how it's done, let me know and I'll capture a bit more footage. So cheers for now. See you again.